Hey guys, what's going on? My name's Anthony and I am an addict. I have been in recovery now for quite some time, but currently only have just shy of 6 months. We all make mistakes. They say relapse is a part of recovery. Um, I don't think that has to be the case, but it's definitely been a part of my journey. And so you might be asking yourself, what is this guy who can't put together any length of sobriety actually going to tell us? And why is it important? And you might be right. Um, do your own research, form your own opinion. I encourage with anyone struggling with anything to learn as much as they can in an attempt to find their own freedom. It's not my intention to offend anybody for sure. I'm just trying to share my experience thus far, explain my reasoning for it, and possibly challenge somebody else's alternate viewpoint. My freedom has come from an array of different sources. I am a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. I honestly work the steps with a sponsor. My network of people, my closest friends, are actually all people who have struggled with the same things I struggle with and have found solutions. And those are the people I surround myself with. And I think, my most important source is my relationship that's ever growing and ever evolving with Jesus Christ, my Lord and Savior. It's a huge part of this for me. And I know AA is not supposed to be a religious organization, and it's not. How dare I make this video and mention AA and Jesus at the same time? And I think it's funny that so many people share that opinion. Because when I read the steps, it seems like a sort of, finding God for dummies. Um, I mean, realistically, anybody struggling with anything could take these steps, replace the word alcoholic with any issue in their life and find a solution because to me, I think the solution leads to God. Um, and I think there's people in the program that would disagree with me on this. Um, you know, this is probably not a popular opinion in this video. Um, there's a whole chapter in the book titled We Agnostics. Um, a lot of people say you don't need organized religion, and I, to that, I would agree. But some people take it to such an extreme. They're so anti-God that they'll tell you to like make anything your higher power. And I kind of get that too, like it seems so weird, when you first come to the program because most people when they first come to the program don't have a God in their lives. Um, it's kind of hard to worship God and drugs and alcohol at the same time because that's really essentially what you're doing. You're worshiping what you're using. You're devoting all your time, your effort, your money, your resources into like getting this thing right. So it's your God. I mean, it's in the forefront of your mind at all times. Um, but so when you come to the program, people are like, find a doorknob, find a chair, make that your higher power, pray to that. Um, and it used to make me laugh. And might sound weird saying as a Christian, but I understand that. I mean, anything that takes the focus off of your will is what you're going for. I mean, after all, it was our will that caused us all our problems in the first place. That most of us are so convinced that we're right. Our will, our what we feel we're right. We're so indignantly right. We'll be right the whole way to our graves. Um, and the smart guy once told me, you can't be right and free at the same time. And there's a lot of truth there. So let that sink in for a second. You can't be right and free. If you're holding on so hard to being right, then it's going to keep you in bondage. You're in bondage to your will. You're in bondage to your desire to be correct. And it's not a good place to be. So we're trying to transfer our will to something. Um, The book calls it God, but the God of your understanding, and I get all that. Um, there's even these acronyms in the rooms for God, a good orderly direction, or a group of drunks. Um, and this is all this stuff's all well and good in the beginning. Um, just like kind of get started. I think it makes sense. Um, my will's bad, if only because it comes from me. So anything that will get me outside of thinking that I'm right is good, right? Cool. So, then I started reading the big book, the AA book, and I started noticing a few flaws. And not with the reading, but with the mindset of like the fervently atheist. Um, the big book refers to things, to God, as things like, in the book it says the creator, an infinite God, the Father, all powerful, and like the list just kind of goes on and on and on. And they're talking about God in the big book because all of these terms they use are capitalized, which references God, higher power, whatever. And so, it gets me thinking, like, how could I pray to a chair or any inanimate object or a group of drunks after reading this? Like, these things are all powerful, they're not infinite. Um, you know, I start asking, how could they relieve me of the bondage of self? How could they take away my shortcomings? How could they remove my defects of character? All these things the big book promises me will happen. Like, how is that possible? Well, I'm glad I asked because I think I have an answer. And it's in the form of another question. Who wrote the 12 steps? Probably would answer Bill W. or Bob. Like they're the OGs of AA. With the help of others, they wrote the big book. AA was kind of their brainchild. They came up with it. This program's been helping alcoholics recover for like almost 100 years now. I think it started, back in the 30s. So is that it? Like, were these steps written by these guys 100 years ago? I'd like to propose that the steps were written almost 2,000 years ago by a man named Paul. Um, and if you don't know, Paul is the guy that like wrote 2/3 of the New Testament of the Bible. Anyways, and there's a lot of books out there that would support this too. I actually probably own some of them. I haven't read any of them, but I do read two books. I read this book and I read this book, the big book and the bigger book, the Bible. Um, and I could probably sit here and dig up a whole bunch of data and come up with like 40 verses that for each step, and we could sit here all afternoon and talk about this. But there's another saying in the rooms, another acronym, KISS, keep it simple, stupid. So let's keep it simple. I'm gonna check out like a half of a chapter in one of the books Paul wrote, Colossians 3, and I read this just reading the Bible, not really looking to make any kind of correlations, but I couldn't get over the fact that Paul is telling the Christians in Colossae that the way to freedom from their problems and a pathway to a relationship with their Creator sounded astonishingly similar, like what Bill and Bob tell us ours is as alcoholics. So I'm just gonna go ahead and just start off by just reading this. So Colossians 3, it's 1 through 17, like the first half of Colossians 3. It says, "If then you have been raised with Christ, seek the things that are above, where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God. Set your minds on things that are above, not on things that are on earth. For you have died, and your life is hidden with Christ in God. When Christ, who is your life, appears, then you will also appear with him in glory. Put to death, therefore, what is earthly in you, sexual immorality, impurity, passion, evil desire, and covetousness, coveting, which is idolatry. On account of these, the wrath of God is coming. In these you too once walked, when you were living in them, but now you must put them all away: anger, wrath, malice, slander, and obscene talk from your mouth. Do not lie to one another, seeing that you have put off the old self with its practices and have put on the new self, which is being renewed in knowledge after the image of its creator. Here there is no Greek and Jew, circumcised and uncircumcised, barbarian, Scythian, slave free, but Christ is all and in all. Put on then, as God's chosen ones, holy and beloved, compassionate hearts, and kindness, humility, meekness, and patience, bearing with one another, and if one has a complaint against another, forgiving each other, as the Lord has forgiven you, so that you also, as the Lord has forgiven you, so you also must forgive. And above all these, put on love, which binds everything together in perfect harmony. And let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, to which indeed you are called in one body, and be thankful. Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly, teaching and admonishing one another in all wisdom, singing psalms and hymns and spiritual songs with thankfulness in your hearts to God. And whatever you do, in word or deed, do everything in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through him. And man, to me, that just sums it up. Like, it sums the whole thing up in a nutshell. And just kind of go through it step by step and like what I get out of it. So first you have, let's just start with the first three steps, okay? And like, these are like, we admitted we are powerless over alcohol and that our lives become unmanageable. 2, we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. And 3, we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him, right? Boom. Like, it's like the gospel, man. You know, we admit that we're sinners. We believe in God and we turn our life over to him. And I think that's, you know, Paul's talking about here, right here in the first 3 or 4 verses. Specifically in verse 3, it says, "For you have died, and your life is hidden with Christ in God." That word "died" isn't talking about physical death. You know, it's talking about dying to our sinful nature, to who we were, right? So, making a decision in step 3 to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God is killing ourselves. We're killing our will. We're killing who we are and turning that over to God. And it's just the correlation there is perfect. So now we're going to go on to step 4. Step 4, we made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. And I think verse 6 can help with that. If we have any, need any help with that, verse 6 says, not 6, 5. Put to death, therefore, what is earthly in you: sexual immorality, impurity, passion, evil desire, and covetousness, which is idolatry. And then also we can just jump down to 7, where it lists anger, wrath, malice, slander, and obscene talk. Sounds like a moral inventory to me. Could be wrong. So step 5, we admitted to God, to ourselves, and another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. And we'll just jump down to verse 9. A little bit of a stretch, but it just says, don't lie to one another, seeing that you have put off the old self with its practices and put on the new self. Don't lie. We're admitting these things. We're talking. We're saying them out loud. So let's see here. And that takes us to step 6 and step 7. So step 6 says, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character, and then we humbly ask him to remove our shortcomings. So verse 6 and 7, and it just makes me think of verse 7 and 8 here, where we're talking about, in these things you too once walked when you were living in them, but now you must put them all away: anger, wrath, malice, slander, obscene talk from your mouth. Do not lie to one another, seeing that you have put off the old self with its practices and put on the new self, which is being renewed in knowledge after the image of its creator. Actually went down through 10 there. But yeah, man, I mean, like, I just think, removing these defects of character, and we ask him to remove our shortcomings, and it's talking about, putting these things away, getting rid of them. And these you once walked when you were living in them, but now you must put them all away. It's all right there, man. Like, Paul wrote this thing 2,000 years ago, and still pretty relevant, considering how many people are actually members of AA. So, okay, steps 8 and 9 are: we made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. And then we made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. So that takes me to verses 12 through 14. Put on then, as God's chosen ones, holy and beloved, compassionate hearts, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience, bearing with one another. And if one has a complaint against each other, forgiving each other, as the Lord has forgiven you, so you must also forgive. And above these put on love, which binds everything together in perfect harmony. And, I read that and I see the forgiveness and I see the love. And I think both of those tie in very nicely to steps 8 and 9, because I don't think you can do that without love. I don't think you can, go back and make amends to people. I mean, that's a sign of love, and seeking that forgiveness from them. So verse 10, we continue to take personal inventory, and when we're wrong, promptly admitted it. And that takes me down to verse 16, which says, let the word of Christ dwell in you richly, teaching and admonishing one another in all wisdom. Admonishing. Didn't know what that meant, so I looked it up, and it's to warn or reprimand firmly. And I think 10 is just us admonishing ourselves. As we grow with Christ, we I've seen in my life how there were some big sins. There were some big things I was doing really wrong. Drugs were one of them. Just lying about everything. Stealing off people to get what I needed to get by. And those things have all kind of been removed from my life. I'm not using now. I'm not stealing to get high or stealing for any reason, actually. I try to be honest about everything with everybody. And great. So these are like these big sins, and they've been removed. And as I continue to read the Bible, as I continue to grow in my relationship with God, what I see is, and I look at it like a sculpture where like God's constantly like chipping away at little things and refining my life. When you start, I don't really know. I've never sculpted anything, but I would assume that when you start to make a sculpture, when you're gonna, if you're gonna go sculpt like the statue of David, you start with this giant block of granite, right? It has no shape, no form, no anything. It's just a cube sitting there in front of you. So, in order to start to get the form down, you probably start to knock off big chunks where there's nothing there, around the head. You would just be knocking all this off. And then you would kind of have this form. You could see the head, you could see the body, but there would be no detail. There'd be no eyes, no nose, no mouth, no ears. None of that would be there yet. And as the sculptor would be making the statue, he would just continue to chip little pieces away. And that's how I feel, is a perfect analogy for my life and my walk with God is, God started by like chipping away these like big sins, right? And now that those are gone, I'm able to see the little things that need to be refined in my life, the little things that need to be chipped away. And I think that's where step 10 comes into play. I'm not there yet. I hope to be there soon. As I continue to work these steps, but this continuation process, this continue to take a personal inventory, because every day we mess up, every day we do things that are wrong, and if we allow those things to escape, I think that those are those little things that will take us back to the big ones. So really cool how that like lines up there. Verse 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for knowledge of His will and the power to carry that out. And that took me, I'm kind of split up here verses 2 and verses 17, which says, 2 says, set your minds on things that are above, not on things that are on earth. And 17, and whatever you do in word or deed, do everything in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father. Um, so, you know, just improving our conscious contact with Him, something I think that would, be greatly beneficial to improving our conscious contact is just keeping Him on the forefront of our minds every day. And then 12, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and practice these principles in all of our affairs, man. And it's the same thing with Christianity. Our job as Christians are to, the Great Commission, go ye into all the world and preach the gospel, baptize them in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. But, I could pull that out of Colossians 3:2, 12 and 14 through 16. Put on as God's chosen ones, holy and beloved, compassionate hearts, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience. All these things that it lists here are things you're going to need to, pass this message on. You can't be uncompassionate, you can't be mean, you can't be prideful, and you can't be impatient and try to disciple other people, right? I mean, those things kind of conflict, I think. And then, you jump over to 14, and it says, above all these things, put on love, which binds everything together in perfect harmony, and let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, to which indeed you are called in one body. We're called in one body. We're called to be together, to be unified. And, it's the same thing with the AA message, man. I mean, look, hey, we all struggled with alcohol, and we're found a solution, and we want you to find a solution with us. I mean, it's love, man. You got to love each other, and you got to, that love that you show other people has to come from a source. And I believe that source is Jesus Christ. Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly, teaching and admonishing one another in all wisdom, singing psalms and hymns and spiritual songs with thankfulness in your hearts to God. You got to remain grateful. The program talks about counting your blessings and being grateful all the time, and it's when you lose your gratitude that, you start down that path. You start to lose these things, this compassion, this kindness, this humility. You know what I mean? Like when love goes, all those things go with it, and back comes the anger, the wrath, the malice, the slander, the fear, which is what we're all fighting at the end of the day. And look, man, I know it's not perfect. I know it doesn't line up exactly. Some of these things are a stretch, but I think all the principles are there. And I just think it's amazing how God had all these things written down and laid out for us, not just the addict and the alcoholic, but for everybody, for humans, for life, because everybody at the end of the day is struggling with everything. My thing might not be your thing, but we all have issues that we're facing, and God lays that solution out, and that solution is to get to Him. And look, I just want you to know, at the end of all this, if you're out there struggling, that there is a God, and that He has a plan and a purpose for you, and He wants to offer you a future and a hope. He loves you, and so do I. Have a great day.